It felt strange to leave behind a role that I had played for so long. Yet my role as captain was the one that I was born to. The Z called me still, and we travelled on into that bleak darkness. Distant ships were visible, yet we stayed our course northwards, the blinding light of Skylar's End slicing through the dark. And then to the northeast, the Isle of Nuncio and the monumental statue came into our sights. Taciturn functionaries walk these docks in uniforms of postmen. An enormous crowned statue casts a chilling shadow. The shadows gleam with rats' eyes. Their ceaseless chittering rolls like the tides. I may not be very familiar with the locals here yet, but I can provide a preliminary overview in the form of a port report. And well, there's the statue in the middle of the island. That's hard to miss. There's the way everyone wears a uniform, and the way they call each other by their ranks in the postal service. There's the way the port authorities refer to regulations. There's the jargon, the curious habit of referring to any used-up thing as cancelled, as though the whole world were made of stamps. I wrote about vestigial bureaucracy, and about trappings of order retained this far from home. I wandered towards the Postman's Tavern. The inky blotter, it was called. The sign didn't look like much. Yet it was warmer inside than it looked. Faces turned in my direction, but no one seemed surprised to have a new arrival on the island. Lit by two roaring fires, one at either end of the room, the bartender is in postman's uniform, like almost all of the patrons. A noseless postal inspector called Blunt Thomas delivered drinks, cleared tables, and stacked the firewood. The clattery heir seemed to be keen to offer her services. She could remove the call from a postal worker. They wouldn't be a worker anymore, of course. The hairless postwoman won't hear of it. But I do get one taker. "I miss London," he said. "I'm tired. The inside of my mouth tastes like stamped glue." Blunt Thomas gave me a bottle of rum and the use of a basement. "No amenities, but I don't fancy cleaning the blood off a better floor." The patient took off his uniform for the last time and lay on the cold floor. "No spectators," said the heir harshly, pushing me out the room. She came out later with a scrap of skin from the patient's chest. The patient followed, whistling a tune from Mahogany Hall. After, I sought to listen in on postal tall tales. Fishermen brag about the fish that got away. Postmen brag about hard deliveries. Delicate bottles lowered down chimneys on a rope. Do not fold under any circumstance letters curled through a narrow slot. Rattling, droning crates brought back to the same address every day for 22 days running. The windows they pried open, the servants they bribed, the delivery surcharges they paid out of their own salaries just to get rid of one more packet. It's hard to tell which they hate more, the senders of mail or the recipients. Stands to reason. If the message was a welcome one, they'd tell the other fellow in person, reflects the hairless postwoman. I then asked why the local currency seemed to consist of, rats. 2 strings of rats for a pint of ale, 3 strings for wine, 5 for the tolerable brandy under the bar. The hairless postwoman at the end of the bar smiled mirthlessly, or maybe it's just the lack of eyebrows that does it. "Long enough carrying things around. You get into the habit." Then she told me that if I stay out late enough, I'll see some of the postmen making a procession to the center of the island, stringing up rats around the statue like Yuletide decorations, in prayer to an ancient deity of this place. From the coughing and choking elsewhere in the pub, you'd guess this is a story they often tell newcomers. Whilst on the topic, I sought to ask about the big statue in the center of the island. If there were a guidebook for visitors, it would have to be the first entry. "Oh, that. It's all of us, isn't it? Sort of the spirit of the island. Most of them don't seem troubled for more of an explanation than that. Though the hairless postwoman told me it didn't always look like a fallen London postman at all. That it used to have a different face, a more old-fashioned outfit. I could not help but ask why exactly the hairless postwoman was hairless. Legacy of some interesting explosive package, maybe? No, she said, curt, not pleased that I had asked. Still at eyebrows when I came to Nuncio. The postman at the next bench diverted me, speaking in a low voice. Lots of people find habits when they can't deliver the post no more. This one has a plucking habit. Best learn not to notice. I glanced up. The hairless postwoman was still glaring at me. Leaving the tavern, I sought to explore the beach. There's a long stretch of shale dotted with washed-up kegs and barrels and similar flotsam. It was shifty going. The rocks slipped and slivered underfoot, but I kept my balance. There was a parcel that wouldn't stop meowing. Extraordinary. There aren't even any air holes. The parcel's contents were not all that pleased to make my acquaintance. A yellow glare, a flash of claws, a distinctive odor. Then the horrible animal is out of sight. I'd like to believe it would come to regret mauling me, but alas, it's likely to regard this rat-infested island as paradise. My left cheek will never quite be the same. Every lap of the wave here drags up some new letter or parcel. The face of the water is dotted with them, as far as I can see in this blackness, carried by a powerful current. There was a man holding a broom, determined to keep shoving letters back into the sea. It was a futile effort, yet there was something poetic in the action, and I sought to assist this poor man. Both of us still won't achieve anything, but maybe he'd feel better. It was surprisingly soothing. In the long term, what I did won't make the slightest bit of difference. Every sodden bit of paper I flung out to sea would come back in a few hours. But for now I managed to clear a small patch of the shore, a few feet on each side. The stones were bare, as they should be. My companion turned his head towards the sound of my work and offered a little nod. Now that I'd been here for a time, I sought the chance to study the odd currents here. The water that brings flotsam ashore does not follow the usual patterns. I made a complete circuit of the island. The whole shoreline is alike, all of it covered in debris, all of it washing steadily inland from every direction. Not the work of some directional current, it's more as though the whole undersea were draining into Nuncio. Except, of course, that force did not affect my ship. Even when I came this way, it does not even stop ships leaving. Evidently, it works only on the post. Returning to the inky blotter, I sought to borrow a uniform. Perhaps if I were to fit in here, I could learn more. They were polite, even apologetic about my request. I am welcome here, and welcome to take shifts at the dead letter office. But I cannot wear the uniform unless I were a postal employee back in fallen London. Regulations. Blunt Thomas lets me have a look at his uniform jacket at least. Neat stitching, gilded buttons, and a thin but dignified circle of braid at the collar. Inside, a patch that goes over the heart, stitched with 6 red letters. I can't read it, but it makes my eyes itch and my scalp feel like it's burning. I then asked why the letters wash ashore here. Maybe one of them will know. It was the pull, they told me. Dead letters are like so many iron filings, drawn to Nuncio. See for yourself, suggested the hairless postwoman. Go down to the shore, collect up a bunch of what's washed there, and you'll feel it soon enough. Saves time for the rest of us, said another voice. Apparently, beach scavenging is a civic duty hereabouts, like working in the dead letter office. I then asked why the postman came here. I didn't get the impression that they were making a holiday of it. Their stories have different beginnings: boredom, frustration, a fellow who was overwhelmed by guilt after a missed delivery. but they always end the same way. Undeliverable letters and parcels accumulating over months and years. Attempts to ignore the undeliverable, to shove it into a desk or carry it in the bottom of the bag. An increasing preoccupation with these items. Finally, a decision to meet the compulsion, to go to Nuncio, to be rid at last of the remnants. The postmen do not bring the dead letters to Nuncio. The letters bring the postman. Slowly, I was piecing together a picture of this place. Now, with the invitation, I sought to try a shift at the dead letter office. There is a sign of a cancelled stamp over the door. Blunt Thomas took me around the office, a small collection room, where those retrieving letters may state their business. A much larger set of back offices where newly arrived letters and parcels were collected and sorted. A dank, briny smell that never went away, presumably because so many of the parcels spent time in the water before they arrived here. In the back room was a machine manned, ratting, by a postal rat, Horatius Faber in a pinstriped hat. It shoveled sludge-damp letters into the machine's hopper, and they came out dry, cleaned, pressed, and sorted into slots by size and quantity of paper. One has various possible occupations here. None could be described as fast-paced. I sought to converse with the postal rat. Why doesn't it make a machine like this one back in London? Might lead to fewer dead letters in the first place.
Oh no, that wouldn't be permitted at all.
There are strict rules about the initial handling and sorting of post. An experimental machine might mangle the letters. It is only the dead material that is unimportant enough to be entrusted to Horatius Faber. His voice isn't bitter, but he twists a coil so hard that it springs sideways out of the machine and pinged off my shoe. There are doors in the dead letter office that I've never seen opened. Surely I can be trusted. I sought to ask the postal rat for a key to the basements. He was surprised by the request. Most postmen don't like it down there. No one ever asks for a key, but he offered to cut a new one and warned me, just be careful in there and come back out if I were to start feeling wrong. The key was warm in my pocket. I had expected a few shelves of supplies, more files of letters of a few years older. No, it is a pit so deep that lantern light does not show the bottom. A spiral walkway descends along its wall, and that spiral opened wider as it went, as if I were looking through the narrow end of a very large shell. Lining the walls are shelves and nooks unevenly sized, some just a few inches square, and containing single scrolls of papyrus. Others support crates bigger than coffins. They were made of a woody fungus grown to meet requirements. There are no marks of carpentry or any of the postal rat's handiwork. 3 turns down the spiral, and I could scarcely breathe. It was time to leave. I can come back later, maybe. I sought to chat to the rat about the findings I'd made thus far. He was troubled, but not surprised.
They say that's been there before we came. Before there were Londoners in the Neath. Before there was a dead letter office. There was someone else. And they built the last layer on top of what was there before, and so on.
When I pressed him a little further, he continued.
And I've been down there. Didn't like it very much. But I wanted to test my machine. Thought it could handle some of the very old dead letters. That would be a good sign, you know? Evidence the machine was in good working order. Good, strong, sorting categories and so forth.
He paused.
There's letters down there that set your hair on fire if you so much as look at them. See the bald patch on my left leg? That wasn't a machine accident. Oh no, that one singed off right as I put my nose into one of them letters.
It certainly was a tale of terror, one that had rather extraordinary implications. I would need light to properly explore down below. Foxfire candles and a flare. Perhaps in time, I would return with both. Walking back along the beach, I sought to collect material for the dead letter office. As I made my way along the shore with a big sack Many of the envelopes were too damp to read, their addresses permanently lost, but a surprising number was still legible. Here and there is a crate, a message in a wine bottle, a sealed cask that had bobbed up out of a shipwreck. My sack ought to get heavy with all these contents, but it pulls upwards and away, straining inland towards the dead letter office like an unmanageable dog. Whilst here, I thought to take some soundings. Perhaps there is some evidence of a great hollowness beneath the shores. Striking the ground causes the stones to shift and rattle. It's hard at first to hear anything more than that, but trying long enough and striking hard enough, the whole beach shivered like the surface of a drum. The flotsam letters quivered and aligned themselves in concentric circles around the point of impact. The next wave brought ashore 3 or 4 times the usual freight. Returning to the letter office, I fed the undeliverable letters into the sorting machine. The gleaming hopper awaited. After prolonged whirring, the machine began to distribute 7 invitations, edged in gilt, into the correspondence of the aristocracy slot. 2 oversized parcels, probably containing books, to the books tray. 1 stamped bronze tablet that dropped with a clang into the bin marked First City. The postal rat watched all of this with an air of satisfaction. Saddling up to the inky blotter, I traded war stories about my shift work. I knew how to fit in here. Saddling up to the inky blotter, I wanted to talk about the caverns below the dead letter office. Someone must know something, or at the least be curious. But perhaps not. I did not get far into my questioning before the hairless postman stood up, walking over to the fire, holding herself tightly. She whispered nothing coherent. Fire, clean, smooth, down to the bone. No excuses. Smooth, smooth, little black hairs. "Still fool your tongue," said Blunt Thomas. That was all I could muster for my investigation thus far. The secrets of Nuncio would remain just that for now. Secrets. It was ever a shame to leave a mystery intact. Yet we had little choice. More light would be needed to delve ever deeper. Flares or foxfire candles. Perhaps they could be acquired elsewhere. And so we carried on, setting our sights to the north, scanning that black horizon. 21st of January, 1888. We watch for fungal paths in the sea of lilies. There is a prison here, guarded by knot oracles. To the west, the Zebat called. It had found something, but before we could reach it, something breached the dark waters. An almighty shark, tormented and bound by wrought iron. The creature was sluggish, only moving in small bursts. Nup Middet Harbor could offer us some safety. I ordered the battery to make for port, and there we reached it. Wisdom, where prison walls are mercilessly steep. Nup Middet built this place as a prison for the Khanate. Now it answers only to its governor, and its governor answers to no one. From the port, I compiled a report. There were not so many goings. Ships from the Khanate are most common, but I could also see Chelonite vessels, polythreme triremes, with chained and sulky unfinished men, corsairs disposing of their miscreants, even one furtive Irene skiff. The wardens pay them well for their prisoners, seemingly a good trade, and perhaps a sign that polythreme was near. There was very little we could achieve in a place such as this, and I had no intention to mount a daring rescue. Instead, I turned to the harbor provisioners, purchasing 1 unit of fuel for twice its regular cost. I had hopes to travel further yet. Leaving the harbor behind, we continued ever northwards, my trusty Zebat circling overhead. There were no isles close by, yet the lilies and the toads they supported made for quite the intriguing sight. On the 21st, we'd discovered the Nocta Globe, an interesting formation, and one that was said to be near Port Cecil. I sent the Z-Bat out once again, and it screeched to the northwest. There were discoveries aplenty around the port. Scott's Reef, Errant's Gyrus, and the Rycon complex, all remarkable structures. Yet Port Cecil, that outshone them all. A source of silver glow, a haven for players of games. Rumpled convolutions of coral fill the water, glimmering with silvery light. The harder I looked, the more I could see shapes amid the chaos, almost as if they were sculpted. This one could be a crenellated castle, that one a horse's head. A neat little port huddled itself into the side of a coral island. Prosaic imperial docks and houses tucked away in a baroque organic chaos. In that curious silvery light, among the frozen chaos of coral, the scene has the unreal air of a pencil sketch, crumpled and discarded. The first task, as ever, would be to gather intelligence for the Admiralty. The question, as ever, what happens here? Seemingly, chess, dreams, and silvery light. The older inhabitants of Port Cecil carry coral incrustations like a disease, splotched with silvery light. They like to go up into the limestone heights behind the harbour, to lay their heads against the pillars of the tower and stare at the roof of the Neath, dreaming, open-eyed. Sometimes they speak of things far away, the Khanate work, the smuggler wars, the Fathom King's secrets. Perhaps it's not all invented. Chess is popular in the principles. The port is full of exiles, drunks, and washed-up Z-traders. They all play, often obsessively. I would need to be cautious here, however. The chess pieces are carved from Sinterlac. Here, in the principles, that can be very dangerous. Yet for a captain as experienced as I, it would be a rather straightforward challenge. And thus it was. Odd thoughts bubbled up each time I touched a chess piece. This one longs for home. That one has a secret desire for revenge against the slayer of its rankmate. This one will be queen one day. Those would do better as metal. I taste the metal. I tried to ignore the thoughts and move methodically to a victory over my opponent. They blinked. "Checkmate?" he asked, helplessly. Even playing for such a short time, it seemed that I'd gained an understanding. Fragments and pages, as ever, and thus there was no reason not to play again. Surely the crew would enjoy a bit of time to unwind. I had certainly earned it. Yet, each time I played, the risks grew. The longer that I spent in this place, danger could very well present itself. I can't be certain how long I had been playing, yet I won another match. The rough coral tips of the chess pieces are smeared with blood, mine and my opponent's. But I'd begun to realize that my moves capitulate the movements of the power of the Neath, the flukes and their shapelings, the bazaar that lurks in London, Mount Nomad that prowls at sea, salt, stone, storm. With every move that I took, the shape of it became clearer in my mind, sharper. "Checkmate," I spoke. "One more game?" Harry, my sly navigator, tugged at my arm, yet I chose to ignore him. I have chess to play. It was now a chancy challenge, but it was a challenge I was prepared to face. Success once again. Gambits answered, fragments gained. Even chancier yet. I steeled myself. My resolve would hold. Yet another win, and more distractions from Harry. I must remain. I must continue. I must play. But for now, I would wander. And as I did, I reached the crossroads in Port Cecil. I heard a voice whisper, "Pawn to Bishop 6. A rearing shape, the size of a cottage, rather like a metered bishop indeed, stands 6 yards to my right. A crevice in its coral side might be a cave mouth. I squeezed through the crevice into a narrow space like a stair. Irregular steps led down. The silver light is strong here, and it grows stronger with each step downwards. Silvery light fills the sea cave, dripping from the walls. It condenses into pools of whitish fluid on the uneven floor. Sea sounds fill the cave, strong and slow, like the long beating of a heart. On a square slab of coral, someone had set up a game of chess. The pieces are different from the ones used in London. I saw spiraling bishops, the corner roots, the kin, and the terrible cream. As I touched each one, a deep voice whispered its name. I had two options to begin: moving a paw or moving a knight. The cat's paw, or perhaps the skin's paw, is a safe move. Yet the knights are fanged like lions. A touch would wound me, an aggressive move, but one that I was willing to take. Oh, the cavern breathed around me. That was Pigwait. Thank you. It distracts from the pain of dissolution in, but I want so to dissolve. Will you help me? Sleep will not enough. I desire no dreams. Will you help? Blood leaked from my hand, an open wound. Yet I'd made an opening. In the flow of the air through the cavern, I could hear the voice of the principals, languorously pleading. I offer an assistant, it fluted. An Scintillac. You enjoy Scintillac, aren't you? A rubbery man rose from a cyst in the floor. An iridescent cicatrice crosses its face. Even in the flood of the silvery light, it pulses like a fevered moon. It shuffled ever closer. Shout, lions! It wheezed, unprecedented. A rubbery, capable of human speech, in however debased and pitiful a mode. My emissary, the cave whispered. Treat it gently. The whisper followed me back up the steps. Take it to the Salt Lions. I now had an acacious outcast traveling with me. Its brothers and sisters had abandoned it. Pearly light dripped from its mantle crest. The principals have touched it, and not gently. But it can work miracles with salt and fish flesh. It seemed that this outcast could serve as a cook. No doubt, it would bump shoulders with our poison air. However, I had a hope that they could work together. I sought to speak to the strange being. It dripped eagerly. If it were to come to my cabin, I would need to put down some form of matting. I attempted to converse. Flyff your hand on the front. Farflap, open your eyes. The outcast had Gnostic secrets of profound culinary import to impart. Even its lesser revelations were enough to touch my dreams with the dread of drowning. Perhaps, fortunately, it gets so excited when it talks about the great revelations that I really had no idea what the hell it was on about. Leaving the strange cook, I returned to the port, eager to explore the coral knoll. Sea lapped around the silvery coral. Humps and columns rose from the coral. A bewildering maze. I would go carefully, and in amongst that maze, a privateer encampment. The empty cliff top above the bleak waves now blazed with color. Striped tents, colored flames, the music of panolia and kettle drum. Mustachioed women played chess, carved bones, ate cats, and polished their terrifying brass weapons. These were Iron Republic privateers, pirates whose practices contravened the very laws of nature. There were two ways forwards. Firstly, we could attack. They were numerous, but lost to wine and music. We would have the element of surprise, but it's very hard to know exactly what those weapons would do to us. It was a matter of luck. It really could go either way. Alternatively, we could creep close and eavesdrop. The Republic is privy to the gossip of hell. If we were to creep close, we may learn impossible secrets. It had been too long since the crew had had a good fight. I knew many were eager, and so an ambush was planned. It was a disorientating battle. Our first volleys did satisfyingly grievous damage, but a half-dozen privateers snatched up their weapons. One was a sort of Gatling gun. Another appeared to fire bubbles composed of rainbow meat. A third made it rain at one's heart. The fourth exploded in a shower of fat purple sparks that chirped like canaries and chewed their way through everything in the encampment. Privateers, tents, loot. The battle was over before it had begun. But by the time it was safe to approach, the sparks had devoured many of the privateers' treasures. We were fortunate to leave with our lives. Had we not acted, all that we carried with us on the Bathory may yet be theirs. The treasure would be worth nothing more than 65 echoes, but we had made it back in one piece. And so we boarded the Bathory once again, loading on a little extra fuel that the privateers' treasures had afforded us. While I could keep us fed, both the Bathory and crew, it was the slow, creeping dread that I truly feared. There was a terror that crept into your heart out here, a difficult thing to shake. If we did not reach our goal soon, we would have no option but to turn back to London. And while I feared the bruiser, I feared the crew losing their minds far more. Was it the same fate that befell my father? Perhaps I'll never truly know. Nevertheless, I would be certain that I would not be forgotten. The masked sailor, far-traveled, and well-spoken, a legend, a tale seldom forgotten. Well, one day perhaps. For now, we prepare to cast off once again into that great unknown.